Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar hosted by the North American Development Bank, NADBank, a space that encourages conversation among authorities, the private sector, private developers, and society in general on topics of interest located particularly in the border region between the United States and Mexico. We thank those who kindly follow us in this broadcast. And before continuing, I would like to take the opportunity to invite those interested in participating with any questions or comments about what we discuss in this space to contact us through the email provided on your screen or through the questions pane. We are now ready to begin our webinar. Today we are joined by Renata Director of Technical Services and Grant Operations at NADBank. Renata, it's so nice to have you here with us.
Good afternoon, Oscar. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And today we will talk about how to obtain grant financing for infrastructure projects in small communities located along the United States and Mexico border region. Regarding this topic, Renata, NADBank recently launched a call to accept proposals for projects that will be carefully considered for grant financing through its Community Assistance Program, the CAP. Renata, please tell us, what is the Community Assistance Program?
Thank you, Oscar. The Community Assistance Program was established in 2011 just for this purpose of providing grant funding to small communities, small projects along the U.S.-Mexico border. This program is financed by the cash earnings of the bank's loan process, and it has an ongoing commitment for funding to provide these small grants. To date, 27 projects have been approved for CAP grants, which means that we've deployed almost $11 million for small infrastructure projects along the border, several of them in water and wastewater, also in solid waste and in stormwater, benefiting more than 850,000 residents.
Considering the characteristics and the scope of the program that you are telling us about, who can apply or send their request to obtain grant funding for this program, Renata?
Oscar, communities and municipalities, utilities are eligible for submitting their applications to this program. The requirements are that the utility have the ability, or the sponsor or applicant have the ability to request that and manage the funding. Also, they have the jurisdiction to own and operate the infrastructure. And then there might be some special cases where you need to have a partnership with an entity that can do that. So, for example, there may be a public entity that cannot serve a remote area near the city, but not within the city limits. And so there might be a partnership that exists between the applicant and the city, who would eventually be the service provider. Also, these projects need to be located within our jurisdiction, which is 100 kilometers north and 300 kilometers south of the US-Mexico border. And then project sponsors need to demonstrate a financial need for grant funding. So we won't provide grants to just anybody, but they do need to show that there's a financial need and that this grant can help make that project more affordable so that it can be completed for the beneficiaries that are looking for new service.
After hearing your explanation about the scope of the program and who might want to apply, I think it's only natural to ask the next question. What financing options are available through this Community Assistance Program?
Very good question, Oscar. One of the most innovative components of this new program, the updated CAP guidelines, is that there are a few different financing options available. The traditional grant option is something that we've done in the past with this program. It's providing a grant, for example, in this case, up to 90% of a project's cost with a maximum amount of $750,000. Or we may also provide a blended financing. That's a grant loan option, where if a community or this applicant has some ability to pay and they need this grant to make that financing, that debt service more affordable, then we can actually blend the grant and a loan into one financing option that would provide enough support to complete the project. And then again, one of the more innovative elements is this emergency need grant. This is something that I haven't seen any other agency providing, and it's up to $250,000. This requires a recipient to fund or refund themselves in a repair replacement reserve, but this funding is to meet emergency needs. So if a pump goes out of the lift station and there is a chance or a risk that they will have an acute environmental impact, then this is the funding that can provide immediate support to providing that repair.
Thank you, Renata. Year after year, NADBank receives applications for a wide variety of projects. Since this is a program that is very focused on certain communities and needs, I think it's important to clarify what types of infrastructure projects are eligible through this program, the CAP.
Thank you. That's right. We have a variety of sectors that the NADBank can provide financing to. In this case in particular, the grant financing is really targeting the core types of services that we believe are necessity along the border and in communities. Those are water, wastewater, solid waste, and stormwater infrastructure management. These are four of our what we call our core sectors. And then two additional ways to develop two different types of eligible components include ancillary projects, which would be ancillary to these four core areas. For example, if you need operational equipment for your landfill or operational equipment for your wastewater treatment plant, then this is a type of project that could be funded under the CAP, as well as different types of innovative technologies. For example, we're working on hydro panel projects to serve remote areas for drinking water. I think one of the other really important things to clarify for the audience is to determine how we find an emergency need or not. There are many projects that are urgent needs, and we believe that we can provide, in this case with this program, a very fast response to those applications. But emergencies really we're talking again about the failed pump that's causing sewer overflows, where there has been flooding that's caused a sewer overflow or a pipe break. But areas where there are landfills equipment, for example, that are broken down and there's another piece of equipment that's able to give them some interim service, then we don't think this is an emergency need, but certainly eligible for our regular CAP programs. And then there might be those cases where we see a question mark here, where you have an eroded area caused by flooding, and it's exposed an important pipe for their infrastructure, their wastewater infrastructure. And we might want to know, again, what's the integrity of the material of that pipe? Is it at a large risk or significant risk for break and spilling untreated discharges? So again, we're looking very closely at for emergency needs, what those needs are and what the impacts might be, because we do have a very limited amount of money available for that.
Thinking about this, about the process behind this, including more information and qualifications, which I think a lot of our viewers are probably wondering as well, I would like to ask, how and when can interested parties apply for such funding, Renata?
The application process is open today. You can access the application from our website. That's NADBank.org. I believe we'll take a look at it just a little bit later. But right now we have a call for applications. So that means we're inviting communities, utilities, sponsors, applicants to submit their applications by January 10th to be evaluated and considered for funding in 2024. So that's an important date. It's, again, not the only time that you can submit applications. You can submit applications after that, but those might be for future funding opportunities after this 2024 selection. CAP applications are evaluated by 4 different factors. We do have a prioritization ranking for applications that come into the NADBank. We're looking really for an impact of the project, what kind of, if the project is ready to proceed, If there is a degree of financial need that exceeds the median household income for the local area, as well as looking at areas that have what we call environmental justice concerns, which might be a cumulative impact from several different types of poor environmental conditions. After the initial ranking process, then we'll again select projects we expect in 2024. Maybe 4 to 6 projects is what we typically would imagine for a funding year. And then every time we receive a new application, those applications would be evaluated and ranked and set into the ranked list pending for selection in following years. Again, to clarify, emergency need applications do not follow the same process. So you will submit an emergency application, it would be evaluated immediately, and because we have a special authorization from our board of directors to approve those internally, we would expect to be able to provide that funding more quickly.
Great. Thank you very much, Renata, for your generous answers. Let's now look at the questions and comments we have received from the people joining us today. We remind you to send us your questions through the email that we shared before. We have here one question. We have received several questions and comments. Thank you very much for those of you who took interest. We have one question. Renata, how many projects or applications can each community submit? Is there a limit to the number of requests?
Thank you, Oscar. There is no limit to the number of applications that any one entity can submit to the process. Certainly, we do have a limited amount of funds, and so we will be selecting those projects based on that ranking process, and we really expect to distribute those funds along the U.S.-Mexico border. So there's a very large area to cover for the needs with this program. And so by all means, if there's a need that you have, a project that you have identified that is eligible for CAP grants, we encourage you to submit your application, but it might take a year or two for that application to be selected for funding. So in the case of emergency funding, again, there's no limitation there. However, after you receive your first emergency funding, you would be required to establish for yourselves a repair and replacement fund. So hopefully, again, when that emergency occurs, you can address it immediately with your own equity and not need to depend on those grant resources.
Thank you. We have here another question from Roger Miranda. Are only services providers eligible, or are non-government organizations also eligible too?
Thank you. Very good question. As I mentioned in the early part of the webinar, is that we do have in this case an opportunity to evaluate that project sponsor or applicant for eligibility. The requirements would be that you have the authority to request and manage the funding, and that you have also the jurisdiction to provide the service that you're suggesting or proposing with the project. So if you don't have either of those two characteristics, then you should be looking for a partnership with the provider that can satisfy those eligibility criteria.
Right, thank you. Here's one more question. If I don't have time to submit my application by January 10th, do I have any other opportunity to apply?
Yes, definitely. That's, again, one of the great things about this program is that we've opened the application, and it will be an open application cycle. The January 10th deadline is really for our initial ranking of the project application so that we can look for funding for 2024, awarding some funding in 2024. Thereafter, again, if there are projects that we're receiving applicants for applications we received, we'll evaluate those and put them into the list for funding requests.
Thank you. We are receiving several questions. We have one more. If the project benefits two communities, should only one entity apply or both?
Okay, I've not thought about that question before. I think that it's important, again, to think about the size and the scope of the project. For $750,000, if one sponsor, one applicant is able to serve 2 communities, then certainly that would be a great project to receive and to evaluate. If that funding is not sufficient to serve both communities, then you might want to think about sending 2 applications rather than just one. Certainly, though, we will give you feedback on your application, on your scope, on your project, and be willing to help you with that. Again, and if you have any questions as you start to develop your application, you can contact us and we can give you support and give you some feedback initially before you even submit your application.
Great. We have another one, Renata. How do you define a small community? By population, location, rural area? Can you give us some more details?
Thank you. That's a very good question. We really have the only thing that we've included in the program as far as small community is to receive additional points related to the environmental justice concerns. But small, we don't have a criterion in particular for the size or population of the community. It's really intended to be more of a small project. I mean, $750,000 is not going to develop a wastewater treatment plant. These are going to be projects that have local access to water, wastewater. Maybe there again are a landfill cell that needs to be developed. So it is less about population, more about the potential impact and the use of funding for project scope that is can be completed and independent with $750,000 for that infrastructure.
Okay, we are reading more questions. Renata, we have some. I would like to read this one. Will proposals other than those considered shovel-ready projects for funding under the CAP program, for example, are engineering studies eligible?
Thank you. Very good question. We will consider projects that are not yet shovel ready. It is part of the ranking factors as we consider how quickly the project can be ready to implement. However, submitting your application and potentially if that application is not ready to proceed, we could look at technical assistance provided by NADBank or other resources in order to help you develop that project. So I would say don't hesitate to submit it if it's a need that you have and you believe it fits under the CAP program. We will certainly take a look at it and determine whether we might be able to help as well with technical assistance.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Monser Al-Sarraj. Are these projects subject to National Environmental Policy Act process?
Thank you, Munzer. These projects are not subject to NEPA, to the National Environmental Protection Policy or Policy Act. We do a environmental due diligence. We look at what kind of impacts will occur with the project, but it does not require a formal federal clearance process.
Thank you. We have another one. How long the selection process will last and when the results will be published? When the funds will be available, when the funds will be available once one project is selected?
Thank you. Let me explain a little bit about how the process is expected to work. So once we receive applications and we meet the deadline of January 10th to begin to review those applications and rank them, then we would expect to select projects within the first quarter of 2024. Those projects then require, we're required to receive the documentation, depending on the readiness of the project, again, how quickly it can advance into certification. Our board then would require, or we would be required to submit that to our board of directors for approval, and then the funding would be awarded after that. So in general terms, if a project is completely ready, you have your final designs complete, you have your specifications for equipment, whatever it might be, and we are able to to select you as a project, then might take 60, 90, 120 days to prepare the due diligence and the documentation for our board of directors and our internal committee review. And then we would submit it to our board. In this case, again, the board had envisioned and management had envisioned back in 2011 that there is a strong need to access these funds as quickly as possible. So in this case, we only have a 14-day public comment period compared to our other project certification processes where there's a 30-day period. We have a shorter period here in order to try to provide those funds just as soon as possible. So once it's approved, we provide a grant agreement with you and initiate procurement. It could be, within 6 months to a year that funding would be available for a project that's ready to move into construction.
Great, thank you. Here's one more question. Besides filling the form on the website, what other information is required to be considered for financing? Do we need to have the project design completed?
So again, in this case, you don't need to have the project final design completed. It might be, one of the things in the application is to ask you what documentation is available. And so you'll be able to tell us what studies are done, if you have that final design completed. If so, once you might be selected, then we would request from you that documentation to see if it meets the standards that we would be expecting to move forward and advance the project with grant financing. So one of the things that you'll find on the website here, you can see that we're on the NADBank website. And if you go to infrastructure financing options, you'll find loans and grants. At the bottom of the page is the Community Assistance Program Learn More button. Here you'll find all the information about the program, and the top line there has a button that you can hit and you can go to the information immediately. One of those is the requirements of the program, where you can download the guidelines for the program. Here, I really encourage you to do that. It provides exactly how we would score your project once it's submitted to us and ranked in order to rank it in the prioritization scheme. And then here you have the applications. So you can download an application if you'd like to do a mock run on that and know what information is going to be required. And then you can fill that out immediately online. And if you are interrupted or you need to gather more information in order to continue completing your application, then you can also check here and have save your information that you've completed so far and come back to your application. So again, talking about documentation requirements is that you'll find that in the application itself, and then we'll follow up with you to actually obtain the documentation after you've been selected. Just below the regular application is the emergency funds application, and here you'll see a unique application format. Again, you can download that and then fill out online all of the information that's required there. It's a simpler application, again, intended to be a process that runs much more quickly than any of the other processes we have. And if you run into any questions, there are email addresses available to you on the website as well to contact us for questions. And then once your application has been submitted, you will receive a email with the confirmation that the application was received, and you'll have all of your information that you submitted in your application in that email as well.
Great, thank you, Renata. We are receiving more questions and comments. Thank you very much for those of you who took interest. We have one question more. What are the technical aspects to validate a project?
Thank you. We'll look for is what kind of planning process that you have conducted. We want to make sure that you've looked at all of the solutions possible to meet your need. We want to make sure that solution is well-founded. It needs to be, a proven technology or technology that we can be confident that will be sustainable with the funding that we might provide. And then we also look again at what kind of standards, design criteria you've followed, if that meets current regulatory requirements. And then we also look for our experience in working along the border to see if that type of technology and your technical scope of work fits and makes sense to, again, meeting the need that you have.
Thank you. I have another one. If our infrastructure has some damage due to vandalism, can that be considered as an emergency repair?
It definitely can be. If that vandalism is creating a failure in the operation of that equipment or that facility, then absolutely it could be submitted as an emergency application. Again, we'll receive that. We'll look at it very quickly and work with you very quickly to identify that need and be able to provide funding as soon as possible. Again, you see here some examples of what might be an emergency: a pipe break, a pump break, a pump failure, a leaking storage tank. So these are the types of projects that we would expect, could happen. It could be vandalism at the storage tank, for example, or somebody stuffing items into the sewer. We know that happens, and so certainly if you are interested in trying to access those funds, send us an application and we'll respond to you just as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Well, we continue to receive questions and comments. Thanks so much for your interest. If you are okay with it, I'll read one last question. For those questions that we are still receiving via email, we will try to send you a direct response as soon as possible. I have the last question. How long will it take to know if my application or project is eligible or not?
That'll be the very first thing that we look at in any application. If there is a question about eligibility, then we would contact you very quickly. I would say, though, that you would expect to hear about eligibility, that initial filter, soon after the January 10th deadline. I expect that which would be in the first 30 days or so after receiving or passing that deadline. Otherwise, in the interim, if we happen to find an application that we have a question about eligibility, we'll certainly contact you and try to resolve that. But I would say the limit would be about 30 days after that deadline.
Thank you. Thank you, Renata, for your answers. As we conclude our webinar, could you give us any final thoughts or messages?
Thank you so much, Oscar. Thank you very much to the audience, to all of the communities that we work with. This program has been very successful, and we expect this updated program to be just as successful, if not more. I encourage you to go to the website. There's, first of all, very great information there. And in particular, you can find all the information you need about this program. Also, contacting us at these email addresses for the traditional application, through CAP application at NADBank.org, for emergency applications through CAP emergency at NADBank.org. And again, we're really quick to let you know how we can help and what you might do to improve your opportunity for financing.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. We want to thank you, Renata Manning, again for your participation in our webinar. And we also want to thank everyone who joined us and was interested in learning more about our program by sending us questions. Thank you to all the NADBank team, Ildelisa, Ryan, Gabriel, Memo. The recording of this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renata.